To give you guys a little summary of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to have a brief description of the pre-war U.S. just to get you an idea of what kind of climate we're coming into when this period of history comes up. We're going to talk about our reasons for entering the war specifically. It's going to be kind of a slavery explanation. If you're, the Civil War, there's a lot of reasons why we entered it. The most common reason we hear is, it was about slavery. That's kind of what we're going to do for World War I today. It's a little oversimplified. We're going to talk about what happened during the war, both at home and overseas, that was significant, and then I want to talk about the lasting legacy of what happened and our involvement. A lot of times in this period of history, you're going to kind of hear that the United States was very isolationist, and I don't think that's a very accurate statement, because we did like to get involved in things all over the world as long as they were our business, and we didn't really want to get involved in things that were Europe's business. And so in that regard, when World War I breaks out, we just said, this isn't our war, we don't want to deal with it, and that was Woodrow Wilson's approach. Theodore Roosevelt, he made kind of his career on being an interventionist, and he said, we need to build up our army, we need to get ready because this is coming, and Wilson and his supporters kind of pushed him aside and said, no, we're going to do things our way. Creates the Selective Service Act of 1917. Does anybody know what that does? Ellie? No. John? So, what are your guys' kind of opinions? Emily, what do you think?
You don't want to get me started on this. I have had this conversation before.
Okay.
I get a little emotionally charged. Basically, my opinion is that if they had done this to America, we would have said, and we would have stereotyped on top of it, the Japanese are the most inhumane, horrible people in the world. Like, even to this day, Americans would hate Japanese people. They would just say, like, they're disgusting. But it was okay for us to do it, and I don't think that that's fair at all.
Okay. What's the counterpoint? John, do you want to answer that?
The counterpoint is that if you look at the way the Japanese were fighting the war, and the problem that they did not have a problem with large numbers of people getting killed, and that was just Pacific Islands. Like, that was not their home islands. And as they got closer to the home islands, like Okinawa and Iwo Jima, were very graphic battles. A lot of people died, Americans and Japanese. If they had invaded Japan, like with a military force, which was the plan, at least 1 million people would have died, just from fighting, and that's just soldiers. And like I read The Good War by Stubbs Terkel's An Oral History of World War II. A soldier said, you cannot appreciate the impact of the bombs unless you were one of the American soldiers sitting on a dock in San Francisco, sharpening your bayonet, getting ready to go invade Japan. I mean, if people were like throwing themselves, I'm sorry.
No, go on. I'm just trying to be conscious of time.
If people were like throwing themselves into gunfire, fighting just on like some random island in the Pacific, they were going to do a lot more on their own home turf if they invaded the Japanese islands. A lot of civilians would have died too. Even more civilians would have died.
Yeah, go for it.
I should know this. Were the soldiers drafted, like American and Japanese? Do you know, like, were they drafted or were they volunteers?
There was a lot of conscription on both sides, though initially after Pearl Harbor there was a major resurgence in volunteerism because Pearl Harbor happened, so everyone was like, yeah, let's go kill some Japs.
Well, at least then the soldiers were asking, or were putting themselves willingly in front of the fire rather than... However, I do understand, like, the numbers.
You can understand both sides, though. It's that's why these arguments are what they are, because there's two sides to every story. It's not black and white. It's gray in the middle.
The counterpoint I would give to John is that if you look at some research studies on the examination of diaries, for example, of Japanese soldiers and civilians, what you find is while the high command and officers were very gung-ho and very much, we're going to win this war, any cost, I don't care, I'll get everybody killed if I have to. If you look at some of the diaries of civilians and the more common soldiers, a lot of them kind of said, this isn't really worth it. Like, I don't want to be stuck on an island with people I've never even heard of fighting just over oil. And a lot of the lower ranked Japanese men would actually complain to their superiors and ask, what are we doing out here?